Alright, so let's get started by going over what all comes inside of your Modda Crochet garden kit. So let's open up this box and see what we've got. Alright, so inside you will find first the crochet pattern in this nice, really well printed little booklet for you. Next, you'll also see this QR code to getting to the video course, but I'm assuming that since you're here, you've already figured this one out. Then we have our skeins of yarn that we're going to be using to create all of our cactus friends. These little tiny skeins for making the flowers, and of course green for making all of our cactuses. Then we also have all of our notions, so we've got our crochet hook, our stitch markers, our tapestry needles, and our embroidery needle all inside of here. We've got this big bag of stuffing that we're going to be using to stuff the inside of our plushes. And then here we have the safety eyes and the black embroidery floss we're going to be using to make their faces. Alright, so now that we've checked out everything that's inside, let's go ahead and get started on making one of our cactus friends. Alright, so for this tutorial, we're going to be working on the first cactus inside of our book. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to begin by working with our green yarn. So go ahead and get that started. And to begin our cactus, we're going to tie a slip knot. So to do that, I like to take the tail of my yarn and sort of fold it in front of my working yarn. And I'm going to take this and stretch it across that loop that I've just tied. And then I can take my hook and pull that loop, and then by pulling on both the working yarn and the tail, I can form a slip knot. I like this kind of slip knot because it tightens when you pull the tail and not when you pull the working yarn, so it's easy to adjust when we're all done. Alright, so once we've got that slip knot, we're going to start by chaining 15 stitches and then 2 additional stitches to turn, so 17 total. So to chain, all we'll need to do is take our hook and our working yarn and draw a loop through, and that's our first chain. So we'll keep doing this until we have 17 total. Alright, so I have all 17 of my chain stitches made. So I'm ready to go ahead and start on row 1. And we're going to half double crochet in each of the chains from the first row. So to do that, we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to be working in the third chain from our hook. So we don't ever count the one on our hook. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. After yarning over, we're going to go into that third chain. And then we'll draw up a loop by yarning over and going through that chain, and then yarning over and drawing through all 3 of the loops left on our hook. So that's our first crocheted stitch, but it's actually our second stitch of the row, because that chain 3, the 2 that we skipped, that counts as our first. So we're going to continue half double crocheting in all of the stitches, all of the chains that we made, until we are back at our slip knot. And I'm ready to move on to row 2. So to do that, I'm going to chain 1 stitch, and then I'll flip my work over. So if you look, our half double crochet creates this additional loop. I like to call it the third loop on our half double crochet. So for this row, we're going to be creating single crochet stitches in that third loop left over by our half double crochet. So to start, we've already chained 1, which counts as our first stitch. That's our first loop. We're going to make a single crochet stitch in the third loop of our half double crochet. So here's our first third loop. We'll go ahead and insert our hook in, then we'll yarn over, draw through 1, then yarn over and draw through all remaining stitches. So that's how we'll make a single crochet stitch in that third loop. So we're going to continue adding single crochets to that third loop from our half double crochet. Alright, and then our last single crochet is going to go in that chain space that we made to turn. And that takes us to the end of row 2. So for row 3, we'll start by chaining 1, and we'll flip our work over, and then we're just going to place 1 single crochet in every stitch of this row. So remember, when we chain 1, that counts as our first stitch, so we're not going to be working in this one. We'll start by working in our second stitch, and then we're just going to make a single crochet in each of these stitches all the way across. Alright, that takes me to the end of this row, so I'm ready to go ahead and start in on row 4. We're going to start by chaining 1 to turn, and we'll flip our work over. And then we're going to be working in the front loop only. So the front loops are going to be the loops of our single crochet that are closest to the front of our work. So it's going to be working in this loop only, not both, but just this one. And we'll place 1 single crochet in each of those stitches all the way across. And really quickly, before we move on to row 5, I want to flip our work over so you can see what we're trying to achieve with the half double crochet and the front loop only. Our half double crochet is kind of making the ridges of our cactus. You can see them working up here. And then this front loop only is going to kind of help our cactus have that shape, sort of like a ridge on it. So the next several rounds, all we're going to be doing is repeating that same pattern of making 1 row of half double crochet, and then a row where we work in the third loop, and then a regular row of single crochet, and then a single crochet in the front loop only. So we're going to repeat that over and over and over and over and over until we get to row 23. So let's do this next half double crochet row together just to kind of get us in that groove, and then I'll go ahead and work the rest of the pattern because it's the same repetition over and over until we get to row 24. So we're here on row 5. We need to chain 2 to turn. So here's my 2 chain. And then we're going to be placing half double crochets just like we did with the first chain, that first row that we worked, by yarning over, going from front to back through our first stitch, drawing through all 3 of our loops. So this is row 5. And we're going to be doing that same repetition. Row 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 are just like rows 1 through 4. So I will catch you back here when I get to the end of row 23, and I'll walk you through how we're going to crochet the sides of our cactus together so we're ready to sew. Alright, so I am wrapping up row 23. Here's my last stitch actually. And as you can see, all of the front loops only and half double crochet in the third loop have left us with some ridges. This is the front and outside of our cactus. So for row 24, we're going to fold it so that our piece is in half and that the outside, so like the ridges that we've created, are going to be inside of our piece. And then we're going to just single crochet these 2 sides together by working through, first we'll go through that back fabric that we've just folded and make a single crochet. And then we're just going to single crochet by going through this side and then the opposite side. And we'll single crochet the sides together all the way down. So you can see I'm working through both layers of our fabric. Alright, here's my last 2 stitches from either side. And our cactus is now one solid piece. So we're going to cut quite a long tail, maybe 24 inches or so. And then to fasten off, we're going to pull our tail through our last loop and then draw all the way through and then pull again to sort of tighten. Alright, so now that we have our tail cut, we can go ahead and thread our tapestry needle. And we're going to keep our cactus so that we're sewing it, we want it so the inside is out, so we have it flipped inside out at the moment. And we're going to flip it so that the seam that we just sewed is halfway through one of our sides. And if you look on the inside, you can sort of see, here's that front loop only row, here's that half double crochet third loop row. We're going to be cinching those front loop only rows together first here in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and sew across the way to this front loop only row right at the very top. And that's going to cinch the cactus in half. And then I'm going to grab the next front loop only row going around counterclockwise here. I'll grab that one at the very top. I'm going to pull my tail. And then going across the way from that other front loop only row that we just sewed, we'll grab one of the ones over here. Sew to the very top. And that'll cinch those 2 to the center. And then we'll get our last front loop only row. Let's see if I can find it on the inside here. Here we go. Here's our other front loop only row. I'm going to grab that. Cinch it to this front loop only row here. I'm going to pull all of those stitches tight. Then I'm going to repeat by cinching the half double crochets third loop rows together. So I'm going to sew through here and here. And I'll sew through here and then I'll sew through here. We're just bringing these together to sort of close off the top of the cactus. All right, I'll sew one more through here. And cinch it to the one on the opposite side. Then when I have all of those crisscrossed sewn, I'm going to tie a surface knot by looping my tail over the surface of my work and then sewing up through that loop. And then I'm going to flip my cactus the right direction. And you can see we've got all of those rows sewn closed at the top of the cactus. And all of those ridges that we've made are going to give us the texture of the cactus on the outside. Alright, we are ready to lightly stuff the inside of our cactus, so I'm going to unthread my tapestry needle. Alright, so that is the inside of the cactus stuffed. We don't want to stuff it too full because when we sew the cactus onto the soil, we're going to be cinching it again, just kind of like we did here at the top. And if we stuff it too full, it'll be more of a round cactus and not a long cactus. Alright, we're done with the cactus. Let's move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, so next up, we're going to go ahead and make the pot. So we're going to grab our off-white color. and we're going to be forming a magic loop. So to do that, we're going to take our left hand and our index finger and our middle finger, and we'll put them right by each other with our left thumb, sort of making a finger guns here. And then we'll take the tail end of our yarn, that's the side that's not attached. We're going to lay it over the lower digit on our left hand, and then pinch it there with our thumb. Then we're going to take our working yarn, and that's the one that is attached to our skein still. And flipping our left hand over so we can see our fingernails, we'll take our working yarn and wrap it around that top digit, being careful to keep our fingers together. Then when we've done that, we can flip our hand back over, and then we're going to take our working yarn and cross it on the top of our stuff that we have pinched, and then pinch it as well. We'll flip our left hand back over again so we can see our index finger and middle finger's nail. Then we're going to take it and wrap it around that lower digit. Once we've done that, we'll flip our hand back over. We'll take our working yarn and we're going to wedge it behind our thumb to hold it all in place. Then when we've done that, we'll take our crochet hook, and by flipping our left hand over, we're going to slip our hook underneath that top loop and grab that bottom loop, and then pull it underneath the top loop that we slipped underneath. Then with both of our hands, we're going to flip over, and then we're going to bring our hook and our left hand as well up and together so that our right hand's fingertips can touch the back of our left hand. Then when we've done that, we're going to use our thumb and our index finger on our hook hand and pinch the two loops, the one on our hook and the one on our finger still. Then we'll let go on our wrap hand here and carefully slide those loops off. Once we've done that, we're going to take our left index finger and we're going to tension our working yarn over the top of it. And then I'm also going to take my left middle and thumb and hold that pretzel twist that makes up our loop here. So I'm going to hold that. Now that I'm holding that, I can let go with my right hand, and by pulling this yarn here, I can tension it, and then I'm going to pull it through the loop on my hook. Once I've done that, I've formed my magic loop. I can let go. Nothing's going to come undone. Though I do need to do one last thing before we're ready to start adding single crochet stitches. I need to untangle this little pretzel twist here. So you can do that by grabbing the tail and pulling it so that it's untwisted. So now that we have our magic loop formed, we're ready to go ahead and start in on row 1. So row 1, we need to put 6 single crochet stitches inside of that magic loop. And when we're working in our magic loop, we're also going to be working over the top of that tail as well. So we're going to be working underneath both of these strands here. So to make our first single crochet stitch inside of our magic loop, we're going to go from front to back through that loop. Grab our working yarn and draw up a loop. Then yarn over and draw through both. Then we're going to grab one of those stitch markers from our kit here. And we're going to mark that first stitch because we always want to mark the first stitch of our round. And then we're going to continue adding single crochet stitches to the inside of that magic loop. Once you have all 6, you can do the magic part of your magic loop, which is to pull that tail. And we're ready to start in on round 2. Alright, so for round 2, we need to make an increase in each stitch. So we'll take our stitch marker out, and then to do an increase, we're going to go from front to back through that stitch our stitch marker was in, draw up a loop, draw up another, And we need to mark that because it's our first stitch. To do an increase though, we need to put one more single crochet stitch inside of that space. And then we're going to continue putting 2 single crochet stitches in every stitch all the way around. Now that we're all the way around, we can tighten our magic loop tail one more time. And then we'll snip it not off, but just kind of shorter so that it stays out of our way while we work our way around. Alright, so that was round 2. Let's go ahead and move on to round 3. So we'll take our stitch marker out, and we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch in our first stitch. Remark that stitch, of course. And then in the next stitch, we're going to increase. And then we're going to repeat that same sequence in between those 2 asterisks. 1 single crochet in the next stitch, increase in the stitch after, all the way around this round. This is my last increase. I'm ready to move on to round 4. So round 4, we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch in the first 2 stitches of the round. So here's my first one, here's my second, and then we're going to follow that with an increase. And then just like before, we're going to repeat the sequence inside of those asterisks until we're all the way around our round. So 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, increase, all the way around. Alright, so we're ready to start round 5, and we can do that by taking our stitch marker out, placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches. So here's my first. Following that with an increase in the next stitch. And then just like before, that same asterisk sequence we're going to repeat until we're all the way around. Alright, so we're ready for round 6. So we're going to start off by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches. So here's my first. Once we have those first 4, we're going to go ahead and increase in the next stitch. And just like before, we're going to repeat that same sequence all the way around. Alright, that wraps up round 6. Let's move on to round 7, where we're going to start by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 5 single crochet stitches. So there's my first 5. I'll follow that with an increase. And then I'm going to repeat that same sequence all the way around. Alright, so that wraps up round 7. Round 8 will be our last increase round. So we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 6 stitches. And just like before, we'll follow that with an increase. And then repeat that same sequence all the way around. Alright, so for rounds 9 through 13, all we need to do is place 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will catch you back here whenever I get a little closer to finishing round 13. Alright, I am wrapping up the end of round 13. And I'm getting ready to move on to round 14, where we're going to begin decreasing. So we're going to start off by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 6 stitches. And then we're going to follow that with a decrease. So when we increase, we put 2 single crochet stitches in the same place. A decrease is where we're going to take 1 single crochet and put it over the space of 2 stitches. So to make one, we'll take our hook, go through our next stitch just like we would if we were making a single crochet, yarn over and draw through. And then before we finish the stitch off, we need to do the same thing in the next stitch. So we'll go through, yarn over and draw through. And then to complete our decrease, we're going to yarn over and draw through all 3 of the loops on our hook. So we're going to repeat that same pattern of 6 single crochet decrease all the way around. Alright, so for round 15, all we need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. Alright, so for round 16, we're going to be working in the front loops only. So the front loops are the ones that are closest to the surface of our work of each of our single crochet stitches. So we're only going to be working in this loop here. We're going to start off by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 5 front loops. So there's my first, my second, and then we're going to do a front loop only decrease, which is just like a regular decrease where we'll go through our next stitch, but we're only going to get the front loop, and then we'll do the same thing on the next stitch, and then we're going to pull all the way through. And we're going to repeat that pattern of 5 front loop only single crochet and then 1 front loop only decrease all the way around. Alright, so for rounds 17 and 18, all we need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch and through both loops of every stitch all the way around. So I will catch you back here when I get close to the end of round 18. Alright, I am wrapping up the end of round 18, which is the last round of our pot. And we're going to fasten off by taking our stitch marker out, and then we're going to slip stitch to that stitch that it was in. So for the slip stitch, we're just going to go through and pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through our stitch. Then we can cut a little bit of a tail, we don't need very much, and pull that tail through. And that wraps up the pot, so let's move on to attach the soil. Alright, so for the soil we're going to need that dark brown yarn that comes with our kit, and we're also going to need the pot that we just finished because we're going to be attaching the soil to those loops left behind from our front loop only single crochet. I like to fold the edge of my pot down so that I can really easily get to those front loop only loops. And then we're going to attach on, you can see all the loops here at the very top of my work. We're going to attach on the opposite side of where our tail is. So just rotate our pot around. And then we also need to make sure that we're looking at the outside of our pot. We don't want to fasten on looking at the inside of our pot because that'll make our soil the wrong direction whenever we do. Alright, so to fasten on, we're going to go through one of those loops left behind from when we single crocheted in the front loops on our pot. And then we'll take our brown yarn and we're going to pull it through one of those loops and then pull the tail through the loop that we just pulled up to tie a knot. And then we're ready to go ahead and start the soil. So we'll start by inserting our hook, we'll draw up a loop, And then we can start on our repetition pattern for round 1, which is to single crochet in the next 5 stitches. So again, we're only working in those loops left behind. So here's my first single crochet. I'm going to go ahead and mark it as well since it's the first of my round. So here's my first. Then we have the first 5, we'll add a decrease. And then repeat that same sequence all the way around. Alright, on my last 2 stitches, so my last decrease. And I'm ready to move on to round 2. So for round 2, we're going to single crochet in the next 4 stitches, and then decrease. Then, when we've done that, we're going to repeat that same sequence all the way around. Alright, here's my last decrease. And I'm ready to start on round 3, where we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches, and then decrease. And just like before, repeat that same sequence all the way around. Okay, so for round 4, we're going to put 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches, and then decrease. And we're going to repeat that all the way around. Alright, so for round 5, we're going to single crochet in the next stitch, and then decrease, and then repeat that process all the way around. Alright, so here's my last decrease, but before we finish decreasing all the way, we need to add some fluff and then also put the safety eyes on. So we're going to pull our last stitch long, and first, let's make sure we're looking at the pot from the same angle. We want this here, our off-white tail, to be at the back, and this part here to be at the front. And then let's also go ahead and flip up the rim of the pot here, just so we can see how it's going to look. Great. And then we also need to add the eyes to the pot. So we'll go ahead and grab those. And we're going to use the stem of one of the eyes to help us count where they go. So they're going to be in between rounds 12 and 13. So we're going to start at the bottom of our pot and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So I'm going to go ahead and push 1 through. And then they're about 6 stitches apart, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in that 7th stitch, I'll place the second eye. Feel free to experiment with this, of course, if you want your eyes to be a little higher or lower. My only advice is to make sure that they are underneath where the soil is, because we want to make sure the stems are hidden inside of the pot. Once you have your eyes placed where you like, we can go ahead and snap the backs on them. Then once we have the eyes attached, let's go ahead and add some stuffing. Alright, so now that I have my stuffing added, it's also time to put the smile on. So we're going to grab some of that embroidery floss. And we're going to want to cut about 1/4 of our embroidery floss from our kit. So once we've got that cut, we're going to go ahead and thread our embroidery needle that came with our kit. And then we're going to want to tie a knot at the bottom of our embroidery floss. I like to do that by holding it against my needle and then wrapping it around my needle counterclockwise several times. Then I can slide all those wraps over the eye of my needle and all the way down until it ties a knot at the end of my embroidery floss. Then when I have that knot tied, we're going to send it down through the fluff that we've added. And we're going to sew our mouth so that it is a nice little curve in between our eyes. So I'm going to send my embroidery needle up so it's really close to my left eye. And then we're going to sew sort of a diagonal stitch, maybe 1 stitch over here. And then we're going to send our needle up so that it's even with our other eye. And then we're going to repeat that same stitch on this side too. So 1 stitch over and about 2 rows down. And then we're going to send the embroidery floss so that it comes up through where the other side of the mouth went in. And then we're going to just run this stitch here. I'm going to pull this one a little tighter. We're going to run 1 long straight stitch here from one side of the mouth to the other to form its big smile. I'm going to send my embroidery floss back up to the top of my work. So now it has a smile. I'm going to tie a knot inside of the fluff that I have by looping my embroidery floss over the surface of the fluff, grabbing some of that fluff and then drawing up through it to tie a surface knot. And then I'll weave that embroidery floss tail in over here. I can cut it short. Alright, so that is the eyes attached, the fluff added, and the smile added. So let's go ahead and finish up the soil. And we'll do that by taking our hook, putting it back inside of that brown loop that we drew up nice and long, and then tightening. So for round 6, the last round of our soil, all we need to do is decrease in each stitch all the way around. Alright, here's my last decrease. So we're ready to fasten off and weave these tails in. So to fasten off our soil, we're going to slip stitch to that stitch that our stitch marker was just in. And then we need a little bit of a long tail because we're going to use that to attach the cactus to the soil. So once you've got that cut, we're going to pull that last stitch long and then tighten it. And then we're ready to close this up and then also weave in our pot's tail too. So we'll start by threading our tapestry needle with the soil's tail. And then we can just sew through each of those 6 remaining stitches. So I'm just going to go through. Once you've sewn through all 6, you can pull tight to close off the top of the soil. And then we need to tie a knot, but we don't need to weave this tail in, so we'll just loop over the surface of our work, sew up through that loop to tie a knot. And then let's weave in our pot's tail. And our pot and our soil are done now, so now we can move on to the next part of our pattern. Next up, we're going to make the flower, so we need our coral yarn. And we're going to start off by forming a magic loop. Then we need to place 6 single crochet stitches inside of that magic loop. Then we can do the magic part of our magic loop by pulling that tail. And to start round 2, which is our last round, we're going to slip stitch to our first stitch. So just slip stitch through. Then we're going to chain 3 stitches. Then we're going to form a 3 double crochet bobble. So to do that, we're going to yarn over. And we're going to go through this stitch here, the one that kind of looks like our chains coming out of it. We'll go through front to back, yarn over and draw up a loop. And we'll yarn over and draw through 2 loops. And then we need to continue. We'll yarn over, go through that same stitch we went through before, yarn over, draw up a loop. Then yarn over, draw through 2. And we're going to do that one more time, so yarn over, go through the same stitch, yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2 loops. Then to finish off our bobble, we're going to yarn over and draw through all of the loops on our hook, and then chain 1. And that's how you make a 3 double crochet bobble stitch. Then we're going to slip stitch in that same space that our bobble stitch is in, which kind of pulls the petal down a little bit. Chain 3. Then we're going to do another 3 double crochet bobble here, so yarn over, go through that same space, draw up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, go through the same space, draw up a loop, yarn over, go through 2, and then again one more time, yarn over, same space, draw up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, then yarn over and draw through all 4, and chain 1. And just like before, we're going to slip stitch in that same space that our bobble stitch is coming out of. And we're going to continue repeating that all the way around till we get to our first chain 3. Alright, so to finish off, we're going to slip stitch to the bottom of that first chain 1 that we made. And then we're going to cut ourselves a long tail. And we'll pull through. So first we can tighten up our magic loop tail, so pull it really tightly, and then we can just trim it short. Then let's go ahead and thread our tail left over from our flower through our tapestry needle. And then we're going to attach it to the top of our cactus. So to sew it on, I'm just going to grab some of the fabric of my cactus, and I'm going to come up through that center of my magic loop. And I'm going to do the same thing in between the space of the next petal, and the same thing here, always grabbing a little of the fabric of the cactus as I go. Alright, so once it's attached, I kind of like to ruffle the flower at the top. I like how it looks sort of uneven, kind of just disheveled a little bit. We'll tie a surface knot by looping our yarn over the surface of our work, grabbing a little bit of the flower, and then drawing through that loop. And then I'm going to send it straight down through that magic ring, the magic loop we made to form our flower, and into just a random spot on the cactus. Then I can cut this short, and that is the flower attached to the top of the cactus. Alright, last it's time to make the rosy cheeks, so we're going to be using this pink yarn. And we're just going to be making 2 magic loops with 6 single crochet stitches inside of them. Once you have all 6, you can pull that magic loop tail tight. And then we're going to slip stitch that first single crochet that we made. And then cut just a little bit of a tail, because we'll use that to attach the rosy cheeks onto the face. So here's one, we need to make one more. Alright, so I have both of my magic loop rosy cheeks made, so let's go ahead and get those attached to our pot. So they're going to go just on the outsides of the eyes and down a little ways. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to thread the magic loop tail through the tapestry needle that I have, and I'm just going to weave it in, get it out of the way early. It's also going to help anchor that to the right spot where I want to attach the cheek. So I'm going to do the same thing here on the other side. Weave that magic loop tail through, and then send it up and into the pot. The nice thing about that is it holds the cheek in the spot where you want to attach it, so you don't have to worry about pinning it. And it weaves that tail in so it's out of our way. Then we'll go ahead and thread the longer tail that we cut after crocheting. And then to attach, we're just going to sew into a little of the fabric of the pot and then up through each of the stitches of the cheek. Alright, so once we have all of those stitches and the cheek sewn on, all we'll need to do is tie a surface knot and weave our tail in. I like to make sure that my tail here is coming up really, really close to the cheek so that when I tie my surface knot, I can hide the knot underneath some of the fabric of the cheek itself. So I'm going to go ahead and loop my yarn over and tie my knot. And when I weave my knot in, I like to go underneath the cheek and then up into the body of the pot, which pulls the knot inside and hides it underneath the fabric of the cheek. Alright, so that's one side done. I'm going to go ahead and attach the other side now. Alright, so now that I have both of the cheeks attached, I'm going to go ahead and trim all of my tails, except the brown of the soil. Don't trim that one because we still need that one. And now, last thing we need to do is attach the cactus itself. So to do that, go ahead and grab your cactus, and then just like we did at the top, when we sew the cactus on at the bottom, we're going to take that brown and sort of crisscross it so that it adds a little bit of a taper to the bottom of our cactus. So go ahead and thread your tapestry needle with the yarn left over from the soil of the pot. So there's that threaded through. Then we're going to stick our cactus on the top. And I'm going to grab a spot here at the front and sew it down into the soil and then across. And I'm going to pull that stitch tight. And I'm just going to continue crisscrossing around. Now I'm going to go over here to the other side. I'll pull this one tight. I'm just going to keep going around, kind of crisscrossing my way underneath the soil, grabbing just the edge of the cactus, taking it down into the soil, grabbing another spot that's across the way that hasn't been attached. I'm going to go around and just double check that I have every spot attached. Looks like I'm missing it right here. So when you have all of the spots of your cactus attached, you can see it makes this really lovely shape whenever we have it sort of crisscross rather than just sewing around. We can weave in all of our tail. So we'll tie a surface knot, grabbing some of the fabric of the soil and coming up through that loop. And then we're going to weave the tail end in, down into the soil, out through a random spot on our pot. And with that final snip, that wraps up our cactus pot.